Hello to you. Well, it's time for a weekly Wealth Insight, and I'm coming from a pretty unique place. I'm at the second highest mountain in the Bavians. So you can actually see behind me there, that's the highest mountain right there. And we're literally right up the top here. It's quite windy, so I've got my headset in, but you can see this plinth or whatever, I don't know what they call this thing, that's right up the top here. And we just hiked all the way up here today. And I thought there were some beautiful metaphors for life in terms of this weekly Wealth Insight. So the first one is that, you know, when you're walking up a mountain, I talk a lot in IRW, Investor Roadmap Workshop, about climbing Kilimanjaro. And I've had the privilege of climbing Kilimanjaro, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But what you got, you know, really clear on was you wanted to get to the top of Kilimanjaro. Like, you knew exactly what the outcome was. And most people are just walking around the base of the mountain. Like, they never actually know where they want to get to. And so the problem is that any kind of path will take them there. The second thing that's interesting is that when you climb Kilimanjaro, you've got to go up to go down. So it's the most frustrating thing. Like, you walk up a hill and then you have to go down, and you've just gone all the way up, but you have to go down. And they actually very consciously do it so that you can acclimatize. So that's a really interesting thing, and it's quite a good metaphor for life, because we always want to be, well, okay, I always want to, I'm sure you're not the same as me, but I always want to be progressing. I always want to be making progress, always want to be winning. But sometimes in life, you've got to take one step backwards to take two steps forwards. And that was really interesting, because, you know, I teach that all the time in IRW. And yet today, like, I've gone through some very challenging times of late. And it reminded me of the story while walking up this mountain, because we've literally gone off piste. Like, there's no, like, we're Bondu bashing, whatever metaphor you want to use. There's no path to get up here. Like, the destination was clear. We wanted to get to the top of this mountain. There was no path. We just had to make our own way up. And so the outcome was clear, very same metaphor. And it was quite debilitating when I went up to suddenly see a huge valley below me and have to go down again. And again, it reminded me of the metaphor of life. Like, I'm often out there teaching other people things, and yet when you go through these challenging times, you need to remind yourself of your own lessons. And it's interesting, because often we know things, but we don't do them. And if we don't do them, we don't know them. So there were two really interesting metaphors for me in life that came through today. Is that, you know, again, you've got to get so clear on your outcome. We often get so caught up in our problems and our drama in our lives, and the way out of that, you know, because that leaves us in an away state, fearful, anxious, avoidant, not being able to make good decisions, you know, and just living life day to day, and you know, quite frankly, in a very negative state. And the way to change that is to get to a toward state. And how do you do that? You do it by getting outcomes. So whether it's climbing a mountain or setting a goal in life, you get clear on those outcomes. And then you kind of just have to go with the flow. Like, you've got to go up and you've got to go down. You've got to go one step forward and two steps back. You've got to go one step back and two steps forward. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's all a journey to get to that destination. And that's why the clarity of outcome is so valuable, and why you've heard me talk about it so many times, but it's not about getting caught up in the problems and the drama. The last thing that I wanted to share with you, which was my lesson for today, is that, you know, I had no guide today. And, you know, when I climbed Kilimanjaro, I had Chifu, and it was amazing to have a guide, because you could just kind of rely on the guide, and you could kind of just, you didn't really have to think, you just kind of had to do what they told you to do. Today was slightly different. You know, Lyndon, whose the 50th birthday it is, and who I'm here with, he kind of gave us some guidelines as to where the top of the mountain was. But my guide was myself. My guide was my intuition. And I just sort of backed my experience, I backed my intuition, and I just went for it. And, you know, I wasn't always sure that I was going in the right direction, but I just kind of figured if I kept trusting myself and kept going in the right direction, I'd get to the top. And, you know, there's the top. I made it. And so, you know, from the top of Africa, I think there's some very important lessons here. And there's some age-old principles in life that if we stick to, we're going to have a far better life, you know. And one of the things I always endeavoring to achieve is, how do you create an extraordinary life? And to create an extraordinary life, you've got to leave the beaten track. Everyone else is doing the normal thing. I mean, the Leopard Trail is the second most successful hike in South Africa. And yet it's a trail. Everyone does it. There's a map. You put one foot in front of the other and you'll get there in the end. It's guaranteed. But to walk to the top of these mountains, I mean, literally look behind me here. There are no paths. There's no map. There's just an outcome to get to the top of that mountain. And for me, that's what living an extraordinary life is all about, is what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? And then you figure it out as you go along. My father taught me, where there's a will, there's a way. It's something I live by. I want to create extraordinary. I want to inspire you to create extraordinary. But to do that, we've got to leave the beaten path. We've got to trust ourselves. We've got to get clear on our outcomes. And we've got to take that step forward. Till next week, have a wonderful thing. Let me know what your thoughts are around outcomes, around journeys, around exploring. Look at this absolutely incredible scenery. And maybe there's one last little lesson in this. We all get so caught up in our day-to-day lives. It's been incredible for me to take a day out and to get clear on what my outcomes are, what I want to achieve, to refocus what's the top of my mountain to ensure that I can achieve it. Till next week, I try to bring these out every Friday. Subscribe to the channel if you like them, share them with your friends. We all need inspiration, knowledge, so that we can achieve extraordinary in our lives. Cheers.